Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from The Last Hours of Humanity, Warming the World to Extinction. This is from chapter 4. It's titled The Clathrate Gun. The deepest place on Earth, the deepest part of our oceans, is a massive canyon in the West Pacific called the Mariana Trench. More than 35,000 feet deep, the pressure of the water is 1,000 times that of the surface of the ocean. At that depth, a normal submarine would collapse like a paper bag. There's very little life there, and what does live is adapted to cold, pressure, and darkness like nowhere else on Earth. The first man to dive solo to the bottom of the Mariana Trench was filmmaker James Cameron. A lay expert on the oceans, in part from his work making the movie Titanic, Cameron designed, funded, built, and in 2012 navigated his own submarine, the Deep-Sea Challenger, into these icy depths. To say that James Cameron understands the ocean in a way that few other human beings ever could would be an understatement. From shallow dives to the deepest place on Earth, he knows the seas, and he knows about their methane clathrates. As he told me earlier this year, quote, "The bottom line is that given the number of species expected to die off in the next century just due to climate change and the other effects of our industrial civilization, we are already in the middle of a mass extinction event equivalent to the lesser ones in paleo history, such as the KT extinction that took out the dinosaurs. So the Homo sapien isn't a species that's currently endangered. However, the Clathrate Gun scenario, James Cameron said, changes that. It doubles down on an already bad situation, putting us on the hit list as well. Not literally, because some people probably will survive in highly artificial environments, meaning the species will perish, but the vast majority of humanity will perish." Cameron added, with a metaphor worthy of his brilliant Avatar movies, "We're talking about the survival of our kids. We collectively are playing Russian roulette. We're putting a gun to their heads and going click, click, click. A Clathrate gun." Only discovered in the serious way in the 1960s, there is so much methane in the form of clathrates, such as the frozen methane slurry on the floor of the continental shelves around the oceans of the world, that it's at least double all the known underground coal, oil, and gas on the entire planet. Peter Ward, the paleontologist at the University of Bristol, told me, quote, "Methane is way worse than carbon dioxide. It's inert right now in the soil. It's not affecting anyone in any way. When you warm it, though, it becomes a gas, and then it starts acting immediately as a greenhouse gas. So this is an immediate and very short-term threat to human civilization." For the last decade, a joint U.S.-Russia research team out of the International Arctic Research Center at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, has been exploring the East Siberian Sea. Arctic. They are looking at the bottom of the seafloor where once stable reserves of frozen methane have begun thawing and bubbling up into the atmosphere. Dr. Igor Semeletov told the research team in 2011. He told the British newspaper, The Independent, about what he found that year and the scope of the impending methane problem. Quote, "Earlier, we found torch-like structures like this, but they were only tens of meters in diameter. This is the first time that we found continuous, powerful, and impressive seeping structures more than 1,000 meters in diameter. It's amazing." End of quote. Amazing academically, that is. Horrifying for those of us who call planet Earth home. 1,000 meters is a kilometer, so this is one massive single methane leak, and it's a bit more than a half-mile in diameter. And it is just one of many. Dr. Smeletov added, quote, "I was most impressed by the sheer scale and high density of the plumes. Over a relatively small area, we found more than 100, but over a wider area, there should be thousands of them," end quote. Those sites would have been familiar during the Permian and other extinctions as well. As Paul Wignall explained to me, the significant thing about methane is it's a very effective greenhouse gas, so it causes global warming. Once you trigger warming, if you release methane, it's in positive feedback. It gets warmer and warmer as you release more methane into the atmosphere. So we think of this as a big part of the Permian extinction at that time. This is very rapid warming. Charles Dickens, who had proposed the methane link to the Permian mass extinction, told me, "We know that in the bottom of the seafloor, large parts of the ocean margins have methane in a solid phase. And what happens when you change the temperature, it can melt this frozen methane phase." He added, "The idea is that during some of these extinction events, we have some triggering that forces the ocean temperatures to warm, and then that melts the solid methane phase, which turns into gas and goes into the oceans and atmosphere. Paleontologist Michael Benton concluded, quote, "The risk is runaway greenhouse, which is when the self-correcting mechanisms cease to kick in, and you heat by a little bit and you release methane. That then causes excess heating and you release more methane, and so it goes on. It's believed at the end of the Permian 250 million years ago, this kind of runaway greenhouse gas exacerbated the effect, making it, the Permian mass extinction, an awful lot worse. By 2010, it was said that 8 million tons of methane emissions were being released into the atmosphere every year, but researchers believe that too is an underestimate. More recent studies have shown a far more rapid increase in methane, CH4 concentration in the atmospheres. In the last 2 centuries, the amount of methane in the atmosphere has increased from 0.7 ppm to 1.7 ppm. That's the largest known increase in the history of the planet. The book, The Last Hours of Humanity.